What year were you born?
Was born in 1980.
Perfect. Were you born in Taiwan?
Yes.
What is the earliest childhood memory you have?
Um, just growing up in my home city, which is Hsinchu.
Can you tell me a little bit more about growing up there?
Sure. Definitely not as modern and advanced as we are now, but I remember rice fields. We grew up in a house that has quite a bit of um, yard, front yard, backyard. Got animals on property as well. Um, yeah, our house was surrounded by rice fields and other type of farm environment.
In what kind of neighborhood did you grow up?
It was definitely farming neighborhood, not big city.
So the you would say like the buildings are a little more spread out.
Buildings are more spread out, all low rises. I grew up on a 3-story building. Definitely not skyscrapers.
What kind of values did your parents instill in you?
Um, Hard work, um, being patient, um, and just being humble. Uh, have the will and the interest to continue to learn and be better.
Those are good values.
Yeah, yeah, they are.
What kinds of conversations did you guys have around the dinner table?
Oh, my parents are a little different. So, world events. My parents emphasize on us watching the news, especially international news. So, discussions around dinner table would usually be about global events, current events, their interpretation of what was happening around the world, to things like there wasn't any gossip, but there was more, uh, yeah, just the bigger picture stuff. And of course, uh, family, because we have big families, lots of different relatives, what everyone is doing, what they're up to, uh, and what we can learn from them, or if someone has made mistakes or poor choices, why we should acknowledge, the signs to those mistakes. And so in the future, hopefully for the kids, we will not repeat those mistakes. Yeah.
Did you have a lot of extended family in Taiwan?
Yes, we have a huge family.
And did you see them a lot growing up?
Yes, growing up, everyone would come home, so to speak, for major holidays like the Lunar New Year, and then the memorials. That's when we will see almost everyone. Yeah, that's how it was, at least for a few years.
And what language did you speak at home?
So the primary language is Mandarin Chinese, and I would say it's a half and half, Mandarin Chinese as well as Taiwanese.
What was your favorite food and who prepared it for you usually?
Um, Favorite food. Wow. Um, so in our hometown, Hsinchu, we're known for our meatballs. Uh, and it's cooked in soup. So it's a soupy type of dish with meatballs inside. That was probably my favorite growing up. And my paternal grandma was the one who would usually make it for me.
How often would you say that you had that?
Probably once a day.
Okay. What did your family do for a living?
So my dad is in um, real estate. So he's in real estate developer. My mother is a Mandarin Chinese high school teacher.
Did you ever have your mom as a teacher?
No, not at school, but every night at home, yes.
Um, what was your relationship with your mother and father like?
Prior to going to school as a little kid, I think the relationship was um, quite loving, as you would expect. Uh, now, during school, I wasn't exactly, top student, and I can understand, the pressure on my mother, especially because she's teaching, she's a teacher, so there is that social um, there's that what's the word? There's that expectation that I would also be a good student because my mother is a teacher. But that was, far from the truth. And so during my time growing up as a elementary school student, I would say the relationship was a little tougher. Um, they were quite strict. She was quite strict with the education side of things. My dad was a lot more relaxed. So yeah, I think during the time that I spent in Taiwan, from obviously I was born there to completion of grade 5 in elementary school, I think the relationship was quite tense.
And do you think that changed after your migration?
It did a little more, yeah, definitely, because the pace of life is a lot slower here as compared to Taiwan. Um, but of course, there are different pressures. So cultural pressure, they don't know the lay of the land, not fluent with English. So, there are different pain points. But yeah, definitely, I would say the relationship is much, much better nowadays, now that I'm a full grown adult, um, as compared to when I was a kid growing up.
You said that the pace of life, you would say in the United States, you described it as slower.
Yes,
Could
slower.
you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So in a country like Taiwan, where the majority of the land mass is not usable, so people are, in cities and even small villages where I was growing up for the first few years, they're not exactly unpopulated. So things do move quickly. People always seem like they're in a hurry to get to places. And I think culturally and in a society like that, there's a lot more emphasis on getting more things done, hustle a lot faster, do a lot more. Um, and geographically speaking, because things are so condensed, if you needed to get from one place to another, it really doesn't take a whole lot of time. So that adds to the need for efficiency and just get things done quickly. Now, of course, coming to North America, we immigrated first to Canada, and then now I'm here in the U.S. Things are more tranquil. slower. It seems like people are more, um, people are putting more emphasis on the process as well, as opposed to the result. And so, not sure if I'm going on a tangent here, but you see that a lot, process oriented versus result oriented. You see that a lot in the two different countries and societies, because I would think in Taiwan, um, in terms of learning, education at school, as well as a lot of the attitudes in the workplace, it's more so result driven. Whereas here, especially in education, we're very focused on process, making sure people who are learning understand why we do what we do. So yeah, different approach.
Thank you for clarifying that. I just want to say that don't worry about like going off on quote unquote tangents, because this is your time to talk about whatever comes to your mind when I ask these questions about your life. So you're completely fine.
Great.
Um, you just go ahead and say whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah.
um, the next question is, do you have siblings?
Yes, I have a younger sister by 2 years.
And what role did they play in your life growing up?
Uh, to me, she was the person who would make me laugh. She's got more than just one funny bone in her. Um, and growing up, she was always someone who, um, I guess, in terms of our upbringing and our education, we always did things together and we always learned things together. So she was my yardstick, like I was hers. But she was younger by 2 years. So, if she could do what I could do, sometimes inadvertently, my parents would make that comparison. So yeah, growing up, she was my favorite person in the world, but sometimes she was, uh, the person I hated the most, because if she could do something better than I could, then I guess something was wrong with me. Yeah. Now, obviously, growing up, the relationship improves. Uh, yeah, we're doing different things at different places in our lives, but we've definitely grown closer.
That's nice to hear. What kind of education did you get in Taiwan and where?
So in elementary school, I spent my first semester of my elementary school in Hsinchu. That's my hometown. And because of my father's business in Taipei, so we moved north from Hsinchu to Taipei. And that's where I continued my elementary school education in the city of Taipei. Um, yeah, so that was the extent of my education experience in Taiwan, from grade 1 all the way to the completion of grade 5.
You just to clarify, you said that you changed schools?
Yes, so my family moved from our hometown called Hsinchu to a much bigger city, the Taipei city. And so because of that, I changed schools from Hsinchu to Taipei.
Can you tell me more about that transition from a smaller town to a larger one?
Yeah, it was epic, uh, in a pretty bad way. So, um, in a smaller town like Hsinchu, kids don't prepare as much academically. So we go to school on day one, anticipating to learn and to start from zero. Um, and by the time I moved to Taipei, every child seemed to be years ahead of me in terms of their comprehension, understanding. And even though, I went from my first semester in Hsinchu to my second semester of grade 1 in Taipei, yeah, I immediately fell behind, because everyone seemed like academically speaking, they were at least 2 or 3 years ahead of me. So even though it's the same country, but the level of education, um, the expectation of the parents as well as the school are quite different.
Was this something that was ever pointed out by anyone else, like your parents, your sister, other classmates?
Yeah, this was, and most notably by my mom because she's an educator herself. So when we got to Taipei, she immediately noticed the drastic difference. Whereas, in Hsinchu, kids are more like kids. After school's out, we would play in the field and, catch insects and run around in the farm, do what kids do. But in Taipei, as soon as you're done with the normal class, when school is out, then there is the additional after school curricular activities. And these are almost all academic driven. There's not a lot of emphasis on physical education, a lot of emphasis on just getting ahead of others, getting ahead of the teacher, getting ahead of the curriculum. And of course, other things like music. So when I got to Taipei, we started music classes as well because everyone else was doing it. Yeah, so your days get filled up incredibly quick because everyone's doing something after school, and it's almost always academic related.
Can you tell me more about the after school activities that you participated in?
Sure. So a lot of the after school activities in Taipei are quite, I would say, quite intense for our age group. So there's additional classes on the subjects that are being taught in school, from the Chinese language to math, history, more math. That seemed like my life, just a bunch of math classes. And then, of course, there is emphasis on music as well, because it just seemed like everyone was going to piano classes or violin classes as well. It is certainly a very drastic difference when I was growing up in Taiwan and when I got to here in North America. People have more emphasis on athletics and other arts related stuff. But in Taipei, when I was growing up, there was a huge emphasis on after school academic, curricular advancement type of stuff.
So did you personally play an instrument?
Yes, so the piano and the violin.
Did you enjoy playing those?
Sometimes, although I would say we we learn to appreciate it. I don't think any kid would, would start loving it because there's a lot of practicing that goes into it, a lot of hours spent on learning, repetition. So it certainly was it was pretty grueling in terms of the time that we had to put into it. But eventually, we've come to learn to love it. So that was good.
And what was a normal day like for you at the age of, you said you moved to the United States at what age? I'm sorry.
11.
11. Okay. So what was a normal day like for you at the age of 10?
So prior to moving to,
Yes, prior
okay,
to moving.
all right. So if memory serves me correctly, we would be up and about by around 7, because my mom does need to go to work as well. So she would make us breakfast or give us money to go downstairs, ride the elevator down to grab breakfast from a bakery store downstairs. Then we will walk to the school and begin classes, I believe, at 8 o'clock. Um, you know, the day always begins by singing the national anthem, and then starting our classes for the day. There will be various classes, different topics. Of course, there's lunch. Then back then, after lunch, you're required to take a nap for 30 minutes or so. Then the afternoon classes. Once that is done, once school's out, usually there are maybe 2 or 3 classes after that. These are extracurricular ones that we have to get to. So some extracurricular classes like math, maybe just nearby the school, so we can walk over there. Some may be a little further, so ride the bus or ride the bus. And then my mom will usually join us after she gets off work for our last class of the day, wherever that is. Then she would bring us home. So by the time we get home for dinner, that's usually probably 8 p.m. Then we get to our homework and hopefully be in bed by about 11.
Okay, I have a few questions about your day. How did you get to school? Did you get to school on car, bus, walking?
Usually it's walking.
So was it a short distance from your home?
Yeah, if I recall correctly, it's probably a 15-20 minute walk.
And you completed that with your sister and mother?
Most of the time, just me and my sister.
And I know you also mentioned you would get like breakfast from a bakery.
Yep.
What would you get from there? Like, what was your favorite thing to get?
Uh, they have these Taiwan style breakfast sandwich. So it's usually bread with the mayonnaise, maybe a slice of ham and an egg, some cucumbers. That's pretty standard Taiwan style breakfast sandwich. So that is my go-to.
And that was an everyday occurrence.
Pretty much, yeah.
Did I had a question about you mentioned that you rode the bus to get to some extracurriculars. Did most children do this?
Yes.
And I know you mentioned after your extracurriculars, you would complete homework. About how long would your homework take each night?
Well, it would be pretty fast for my sister, but me being a slow learner, it'd be a lot longer. So I would say maybe another 2 or 3 hours.
And did you receive homework from each subject?
Yes. So there will be homework from the school assigned by the teachers, and in different disciplines. Then, of course, there will also be homework from these extracurricular places.
Could you tell me more about your favorite places to be as a child?
I think growing up in the concrete jungle, Taipei, uh, favorite place to get to would probably be any of the local playgrounds or parks for the weekend. Um, yeah, that's the time when I don't have to think about homework, just be a kid,
And did you have time to go to these places during the week?
Most definitely not.
And what would you say were your favorite places before you moved there? Like the first city you were in?
Oh, okay. So in Hsinchu, definitely just the abundance of space. Um, the farm, the yards that we have, um, just running around with animals. Yeah, just the overall community. It's just farmland. So it was truly just open space and being a kid and run around from rice field to rice field, chase dogs, being chased by dogs, that kind of stuff.
And would you say you had a lot more time, free time in the first city than the second city?
Yes, most definitely.
Could you tell me a little bit about your friends?
Yeah. So um, one thing we need to know is even even for elementary school, the class sizes are big. I remember I was probably in a class of 40 or 50 students, and that's just one class. So the entire school for that particular grade year, that grade level, there are maybe 5, 6, 10, you know, classes. So you don't really get to know a lot of people outside of your class. And even within your class, there are kids who are, maybe they don't live in the area, so they get picked up, they get dropped off and picked up. So you don't really get to know them. Anywho, the ones that I got to know um, in Hsinchu, the first city, they're all neighbors, and we all walk the same way from our neighborhood to the school, cutting across grass fields, cutting across farms, and on the way home, pretty similar stuff. So pretty leisurely. In Taipei, where everything is a lot more built out, you have high rises, uh, very, very busy roads, lots of buses, motorcycles, and cars. Definitely not leisure in terms of walking from one place to another. So, yeah, the friends that I remember, um, they all live close by to the school, but we're all at different condominium communities or high-rise communities, so you hardly ever see them outside of the school hours. Uh, yeah, so your interactions are limited to while you're in school.
And how big was each friend group in each city?
For me, probably 4 or 5 in the group. Yeah, definitely not a big group.
So you don't think the group size changed from each city to city?
No, no, I was a shy one, so that's probably why.
And what did you play with your friends?
Well, in Shinju, it's just a lot of running around, chasing after each other, uh, chasing things you're not supposed to chase, like farm animals, getting chased by them. In Taipei, definitely not a lot of that. I think um, people were, kids were more interested in comic books and just things that are more, what's the word? Things that are just more still. Uh, yeah, not a lot of active activities. Even sports. I don't think many of my friends at that time were into sports.
were you more interested in the more active activities?
Yeah, definitely. Not to say I was athletic, not at all, but I just like moving about and running around. Um, that was always more fun to me than sitting and reading and laughing at comics or watching TV. I didn't really enjoy those.
And I know you talked a little bit about this, but how much time would you say that you spent with your friends?
In the aggregate, on a daily basis, probably not including when school's in session, between breaks and lunch and whatnot, maybe at most an hour every day.
And do you still keep in touch with any friends from your childhood in Taiwan?
Yeah, actually, I do keep in contact with one in particular. Obviously, when I was growing up, there wasn't things like Messenger or IG or Facebook, but we were able to reconnect on Facebook about 10 years ago. And yeah, we've kept in touch. I got to see her a few times when I visited Taiwan and when she visited LA. So yeah, that's nice.
And what memories do you remember of this specific friend?
Yeah, she was the mother goose. She held the class in order. She was the prototypical A student, shall we say. Um, Always the class leader in grades and stuff like that. So that was my memory of her.
And was she your friend from Taipei or
Yeah, from Taipei.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, and would was she a friend that you would hang out outside of class or it was just interactions in the classroom?
It was interaction in the classroom because people got their extracurricular stuff to do after school, so there wasn't much to interact with afterwards. But in school, there was because the two of us were the taller ones in class, so we always sat in the back, and she was always top of the class, and I was always bottom of the class. So I guess the teacher thought if my teacher put me next to her, I would improve on my grades. Haha, did not, but I guess that was the plan.
And what would you say is one of your favorite memories while growing up?
In Taiwan,
Yes.
oh, favorite memory. One of the favorite memories growing up in Taiwan. I have to say holidays, especially Lunar New Year, or some people call it Chinese New Year. Politically correct is Lunar New Year, but yeah, that because it got the entire family, the extended family together, and that was fun.
What sorts of things you do when you gathered for this holiday?
Lots of food, more food, and when you're so full, there's more food. Um, uh, Firecrackers for kids, not fireworks, firecrackers, um, and just cousins, relatives, neighbors. It's like the entire community coming to life. You probably don't see them very often, but during celebration times, you see people and just so much to do. And as little kids, in Taiwan, as I'm sure in a lot of Asian cultures, during Lunar New Year, kids get red pockets So these are like envelopes in red, and there's some money inside. Um, yeah, so that's always fun, getting some money to go and do the things you want to do.
Was there any particular year that stands out to you in your memory?
Hmm, I think the last time that my family was able to join in on this right before we immigrated, that Lunar New Year to me was probably the most memorable, because do keep in mind I was a little older, so my recollection was better at the time compared to the years prior. But it was also the time where, yeah, I could remember more, um, and yeah, lots of family. Because the year after, our family being not in Taiwan, we had to spend it by ourselves. So that was a drastic change in comparison to the year prior. So I think that's one of the reasons why it stood out.
And how long would how many days would these celebrations last?
So the government will give people 2 weeks off. We don't spend the 2 weeks eating. That'd be scary. But I would say the main event, shall we say, would be about a good 2 to 3 days. Yeah.
And would your family spend it in the same place every year, or would you move around to meet family?
Yeah. So way back when, right? So during that time, um, even though everyone may travel to different places to work, like my family, we went from our hometown in Hsinchu, we went to Taipei, right? But during the Lunar New Year, that's like a calling to come home. It would be equivalent to Thanksgiving, I would think. So no matter where you are, you do your best to come home to family. So we will always, when we did it, we will always be in Hsinchu, be at our ancestral home. That's where the extended family was based at for for a long time. So that's where we would go home to.
So moving from Hsinchu to Taipei, um, you didn't have a lot of family around?
Not really. We have we have a few uncles and aunts in Taipei as well, but um, everyone's just so busy, and my sister and I were certainly busy, with the amount of stuff we had to do after class. So there was barely any time to do other stuff.
And going back to the Lunar New Year, um, you mentioned community parties. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So besides each family's own gatherings, there will also be these community gatherings around temples or markets, um, and they would always be really loud uh, music, stage plays, uh, lots of food. Um, yeah,
Oh,
just things that people would gather around to enjoy.
and what was your favorite part of these community parties?
Yeah, I was a fat kid growing up, so definitely food.
And was religion an important aspect of your childhood or this celebration?
Yes. So Taiwan at the time, especially in our neighborhood in Hsinchu, the majority of the people were influenced by Buddhism or Taoism. Um, right. Not that we shave heads and and worship in temples, but we pay respect to these ancestors. So yes, as a kid growing up, uh, we have that influence in our lives, and we are reminded and taught these values. So being humble, having respect for elders and for things and people you should respect, have respect for life, be thankful for what we are given, work hard. Um, yeah, so the traditional values of the Taiwanese people, um, I would say, are quite common because of this basis in the religion.
Can you describe a particularly worrisome or challenging experience from your childhood?
Mm, yeah, academic challenged. Yes. So I always felt like I was behind um, in the learning environment in Taiwan, especially in Taipei. So after we moved to Taipei, just felt like I was always behind. Things were moving so quickly, and I was just not able to get it. My comprehension was just not there. Um, Part of it probably had to do with the inability to focus because my mind would wander. Um, but yeah, there was, I would say, academia was quite challenging for me, that learning environment.
And when you grew up, what kind of life and profession did you imagine having as a grown-up?
Well, I would say my life may be fairly different than a typical Taiwan national living out his or her life in Taiwan. So, at the end of grade 5, my family gave me the opportunity to immigrate. So, I was able to experience a different world. Um, yeah, so once I got to here, it opened me up to a lot of other opportunities. Um, Growing up, I thought one day I could play hockey professionally. That didn't pan out. But you had more to imagine. You had more room, more growth, I would say, as an individual.
So growing up, your dream job was to be a hockey player?
Yeah, be a hockey player. I mean, there were other stuff, right? I think every boy who watched Top Gun for the first time would be like, ooh, I want to do that too. Anywho, for me, it was more like, yeah, I want to play hockey.
And what did you think what your ideal family or house looked like when you were growing up in Taiwan?
In Taiwan, in Taipei, we were living in high rises. These are all concrete structures. But I could always recall our family home in Hsinchu. So it's a low rise, 3-story building. It's got yard, it's got trees in the back, it's got a chicken coop. So it was more village living. And so growing up, that was always the home that I thought a proper home should be, with space and clean air, and you can look up, you can see the sky, not see other skyscrapers and high rises. So yeah, growing up, that was the vision.
Did you imagine you would ever live the kind of life you live now?
No, not at all.
And in sum, what kinds of feelings and words come to mind when you remember your childhood in Taiwan?
I'll say it was tough, but it was was also quite happy because I could spend a lot of time with my family, even though we're all busy doing our stuff. But at least we were, a family together. Um, I will also say it was the time when a lot of our core values as kids were being instilled in us. So I cherish those times. Certainly tough growing up, but it gave me, it kept me grounded. Yeah,
And how often would you say that you think and reflect about your time growing up?
quite a bit. Um, I think that comes with age. The older you are now, the more you think about the past. But yeah, just being appreciative of what others have done. Especially my folks. Uh, what they had to sacrifice and go through to make things happen for us here. First in Canada and now here in the U.S. Yeah, and I practice immigration law, so I see families do this for their kids. So I can think back and reflect on what my parents did to get me here. So yeah, uh, really appreciate what they did.
And my last question for today, or official question, is
Mhm.
if you could tell your 10-year-old self one thing, what would it be?
I would certainly tell my 10-year-old self to behave more and not piss off my parents so much, because knowing what I know now about what they had to go through to provide the type of life that I had growing up, um, I certainly could have done better as a kid to make their lives easier for me and for them. So, yeah, certainly would tell myself to watch myself and behave.
I appreciate you sharing your childhood in Taiwan with me. I will be ending the recording now.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, perfect.